December 1942. The Kaiser Shipyards, Richmond, California. Fog rolls across the bay like a grey curtain, and through it sparks rain down from steel scaffolding that climbs toward the sky. The air smells of welding torch and salt water. Cranes swing through the mist. Metal screams against metal. A cargo ship rises from the mud. 14,000 tons of steel and rivets and hope. It takes shape, not in months, but in days. 4 days, 15 hours, 29 minutes. Across the Atlantic, German engineers monitoring intercepted reports stop mid-conversation. They read the numbers again. Unmöglich. Impossible. It must be a transmission error. It must be propaganda. It isn't. The ship, a Liberty ship, slides into the water, while German analysts are still trying to understand the mathematics of what they're seeing. To them, it defies physics. To American workers, it's Tuesday. This is the story of how a nation turned welding and willpower into a weapon of war, and why, when German engineers finally saw the numbers, they were speechless. In 1941, the world's oceans belong to wolves. German U-boats prowl the Atlantic shipping lanes like predators circling wounded prey. Convoys burn on the horizon. Torpedoes split cargo ships in half, sending men and materiel to the bottom in minutes. Britain is on its knees. Ports, empty cities, starving. The lifeline across the Atlantic is bleeding out. The United States, newly drawn into the war, faces a nightmare written in salt water and steel. How do you move mountains of men and material across an ocean infested with submarines? How do you feed armies, supply invasions, sustain entire nations, when every ship you build might be on the ocean floor before it completes a second voyage? Traditional shipbuilding offers no answer. A single cargo vessel takes nearly a year to construct, hand-riveted, custom-fitted, built by craftsmen who learned their trade over decades. At that rate, the Allies will lose the war faster than they can build the ships to fight it. The mathematics are brutal and simple. Germany is sinking ships faster than anyone can replace them. But then comes an idea so radical it sounds like madness. Standardize everything, simplify the design, strip away elegance and tradition. Build not for beauty or longevity, but for quantity and speed. Create a merchant vessel that can be manufactured like a product on an assembly line. The Liberty ship. Critics call it an ugly duckling, a floating shoebox, a disgrace to naval architecture. Engineers call it impossible. You cannot mass-produce ships the way you mass-produce automobiles. The ocean demands respect, craftsmanship, precision. This cheap welded monstrosity will break apart in the first storm, they say. It will fail. But by war's end, America will build 2,710 of them. More ships than Germany can sink, more tonnage than the Axis powers combined can destroy. They will carry the weight of victory across every ocean to every theater, sustaining invasions and feeding nations. The central question burns like a welding torch in the fog. How did America achieve industrial speed that even Germany's finest engineers couldn't comprehend? How did a nation with no tradition of mass shipbuilding outpace the most advanced industrial power in Europe? The answer lies not in engineering genius, but in something far more profound. The Liberty ship was never meant to be remarkable. Its origins are humble, almost accidental, a 1939. British design called the Ocean-class freighter, conceived in desperation as convoy losses mounted. The British needed cargo vessels they could afford to lose, ships simple enough to build quickly, and cheap enough that their destruction wouldn't bankrupt the war effort. Functionality over form, survival over elegance. When America enters the war, the design crosses the Atlantic with it. But the man who seizes upon it has never built a ship in his life. Henry J. Kaiser is a construction magnate, a dam builder, a man who moves earth and pours concrete. He knows nothing of naval architecture, nothing of maritime tradition. To shipbuilding purists, he is an outsider, an amateur playing in waters far too deep for him. Kaiser looks at the blueprints and sees something no one else does. Not a ship, but a problem of assembly. Not craftsmanship, but mathematics. We don't have time to build perfect ships, he tells his engineers. We build good enough ones fast. He makes a decision that horrifies traditionalists. Instead of rivets, thousands upon thousands of hand-driven rivets, each one requiring skilled labor, he chooses welding. Electric arc welding, a technique distrusted by old shipwrights who believe welded seams will crack under ocean stress. who know that riveted hulls have carried vessels safely for generations. Welding is unproven. Welding is dangerous. Welding is fast. Then comes the second heresy. Instead of recruiting trained shipbuilders, men who apprenticed for years, who understand the ancient rhythms of ship construction, Kaiser opens his yards to anyone willing to learn. Housewives who've never held anything heavier than an iron, farmers who know soil better than steel, teenagers fresh out of high school, former clerks and salesmen and laborers from the Depression work camps. To naval architects watching from the East Coast, it is madness given form. You cannot build ships this way. The ocean will reject them. They will break apart. They will sink. Kaiser builds them anyway. The first Liberty ship, the SS Patrick Henry, takes 244 days from keel to launch. An eternity in wartime, but faster than traditional methods. The next ship takes 150 days. Then 50, then 10. The yards learn, the workers learn. Every ship teaches them something new, how to position the cranes more efficiently, how to pre-assemble larger sections, how to coordinate teams so that welders are never waiting for steel. The process refines itself with each hull shedding inefficiency like dead skin until December 1942. The SS Robert E. Peary. 4 days, 15 hours, 29 minutes from keel laying to launch. The workers know they're attempting something impossible, so they work through fog and rain through the night, under floodlights that turn the shipyard into a stage of shadows and sparks. Shifts blend together, no one goes home. The ship rises from nothing like a magic trick performed in industrial time. When the news reaches, Germany intercepted through intelligence channels and neutral observers, the response is uniform disbelief. German engineers in Peenemünde, men who design rockets and submarines, who understand metallurgy and stress calculations, gather around the reports. They check the numbers again. They assume translation errors, propaganda, deception, unmöglich, impossible. One engineer staring at reconnaissance photographs of American shipyards counts the hulls in various stages of construction. He counts again. The photographs don't lie. The mathematics don't lie. They're building ships, he says quietly, the way we build Volkswagens. In that moment, something shifts. The war is still being fought with tanks and planes and submarines, but underneath it all, a different kind of battle is being waged. A battle of production of industrial will, of who can make more faster. And America, it seems, has found a way to manufacture miracles on a timeline that defies everything Germany thought it knew about war. For German engineers, raised in a culture of precision, hand-fitted machinery, tolerances measured in fractions of millimeters, craftsmanship elevated to philosophy, the American approach reads like blasphemy written in steel. German factories produce masterpieces. Each U-boat is a work of art, each component precisely machined, each weld inspected with instruments calibrated to perfection. Quality is sacred. Quality takes time. The Americans reject this entirely. The secret of the Liberty ship isn't craftsmanship, it's repetition. It's breaking a seemingly impossible task into hundreds of smaller, manageable pieces, and then multiplying those pieces across space and time. Each Liberty ship is divided into 250 prefabricated sections, not built sequentially bow to stern the way ships have been built for centuries, but simultaneously in parallel across dozens of locations. A single shipyard becomes a factory floor. The bow takes shape in one area, while the stern rises in another. Engine rooms are assembled as complete units before being lifted into place by cranes. Deck sections arrive pre-welded, pre-fitted, ready to drop into position like puzzle pieces designed with absolute precision. Every bolt is standardized. Every pipe follows identical specifications. Every steel plate is cut to the same dimensions in factories hundreds of miles away, then shipped to the yards where workers who've never seen the ocean weld them into ships that will cross it. Each worker specializes in a single repeated motion. You don't learn to build a ship. You learn to weld this particular seam, to rivet this specific joint, to operate this one crane in this exact way. The skill isn't comprehensive, it's concentrated. A welder might spend 8 hours a day making the same weld on different hulls, perfecting that single motion until it becomes muscle memory, until she can do it in the dark, in the rain, in her sleep. By 1943, the numbers stop making sense to anyone trained in traditional methods. One Liberty ship slides into the water every 8.8 hours. Not every week, not every day, every 8 hours. Sunrise, afternoon, midnight hulls entering the water in a rhythm that feels less like construction and more like breathing. 5,000 tons of steel consumed per day across all yards. Mountains of metal flowing into the shipyards on trains that never stop running. Rivers of raw material transformed into finished vessels before the week ends. 700,000 workers across 18 shipyards. Cities within cities, entire communities built around the single purpose of producing ships. Richmond, California, Portland, Oregon, Baltimore, Maryland. Each yard operates 24 hours, 3 shifts, no holidays, no rest. The work never stops because the war never stops. Over 8 million tons of cargo capacity launched per month, enough to carry entire armies, to feed nations, to rebuild continents. It isn't magic, it's mathematics made visible. It's Henry Ford's assembly line transplanted from Detroit to the waterfront. It's Frederick Taylor's time-motion studies applied to steel and salt water. It's the systematic dismantling of centuries of shipbuilding tradition, and its replacement with something colder, more efficient, more brutal in its logic. And behind the mathematics, behind the numbers that German analysts study with growing horror, is the will of a nation that has turned its entire economy into a single roaring machine. Every factory retooled for war production, every farm growing food for soldiers, every mind focused on a single question: how do we make more faster? The shipyards at night look like cities on fire. Floodlights blaze against the darkness. Welding torches paint orange streaks across steel skeletons. Sparks cascade like waterfalls of light. Women in work coveralls and leather gloves crouch inside half-finished hulls, their faces lit by the blue-white glare of arc, welding their hands steady as they fuse metal to metal. The noise is overwhelming, hammers and grinders and cranes, and the endless hiss of cutting torches. The air tastes of ozone and hot metal. Determination made visible. Democracy transformed into industrial output, victory being welded together one seam at a time. The Liberty ship is a paradox wrapped in steel. Crude in execution, elegant in purpose. 441 feet long, 56 feet wide, drawing 27 feet of water when fully loaded. Capable of carrying 9,000 tons of cargo, tanks, trucks, locomotives, aircraft, ammunition, food, medical supplies, the raw materials of war and survival. Its heart is simplicity itself. 3 holds forward, 2 aft, each one a cavernous space designed not for efficiency of loading but for speed of construction. The engine sits amidships, a reciprocating steam engine, old-fashioned, even by 1,940 seconds, standards technology that belongs to an earlier era. Modern ships use turbines, but turbines require precision manufacturing, specialized parts, skilled engineers. The Liberty ship's engine is simple enough that a mechanic with basic training can maintain it, robust enough that it keeps running even when neglected. Maximum speed 11 knots, barely faster than a man can run. U-boats can circle them like sharks toying with wounded prey. But speed isn't the point, volume is the point. You don't outrun the submarines, you outnumber them. The genius lies in what isn't there. No unnecessary compartments, no decorative elements, no comfort features for the crew beyond basic survival. Everything sacrificed to the altar of rapid construction. A Liberty ship is a tool, not a vessel. It exists to move cargo from one point to another, and if it survives a single voyage, it has justified its existence. Prefabrication makes parallel construction possible, something even Germany's advanced shipyards haven't fully mastered. German efficiency focuses on perfecting individual units. American efficiency focuses on multiplying imperfect units until their sheer number becomes overwhelming. Kaiser borrows from automobile assembly lines from the slaughterhouses of Chicago, where Henry Ford first witnessed disassembly broken into repeatable steps. He breaks tradition in a craft that hasn't fundamentally changed since the age of wooden ships. Shipbuilding has always been an art. Kaiser makes it a science. Each shipyard receives identical materials delivered on precise schedules. Blueprints are standardized down to the smallest detail. Workflow charts map every step of construction, every movement of every crane, every position of every worker. Nothing is left to chance or craftsmanship or individual interpretation. The system is designed so that an entirely unskilled workforce can build a seaworthy vessel in weeks. The Germans watching from across the Atlantic build marvels. Their U-boats are engineering masterpieces, sleek hulls designed for hydrodynamic perfection, diesel engines that run silent and deep-pressure hulls, calculated to withstand depths that would crush lesser vessels. Their surface ships are works of art. The Bismarck, the Tirpitz ships that carry names like legends that take years to build and inspire awe in everyone who sees them. But there are so few of them. A single German heavy cruiser might take 3 years to complete. In that same span, America launches over 1,500 Liberty ships. Ugly, boxy, inelegant ships that naval architects refuse to call beautiful. Ships that leak in rough seas, that crack in cold water, that sometimes break in half when waves hit them wrong. But ships that exist, ships that sail, ships that carry the war across oceans. In war, quantity becomes its own form of quality. A perfect ship sunk is worth nothing. A mediocre ship that delivers its cargo is worth everything. The Liberty ship proves what military theorists have suspected but never tested at this scale, that mass production can overwhelm tactical superiority, that adequate design multiplied becomes excellence through sheer volume, The answer isn't building something better, but building something good enough, and building it faster than the enemy can destroy it. The blueprints themselves are unremarkable. Any naval architect could design a basic cargo vessel, but the system that turns those blueprints into 2,000 ships in 3 years, that is the miracle. Not the ship itself, but the machinery of its creation. Democracy, industrialized, freedom mass-produced, hope welded into hulls and launched into waters where tyranny thought it ruled unchallenged. Liberty ships are not just steel. They are stories written in sweat and sparks, in calloused hands and determined faces, in the transformation of ordinary people into builders of extraordinary things. Rosie the Riveter is more than a poster on a factory wall. She is real. She has a name, thousands of names. She is the woman who last year was raising children and managing a household, who never imagined herself wearing work boots and leather gloves, climbing scaffolding 30 feet above the ground with a welding torch in her hand. She is the teenager who lied about her age to get hired, who sends half her paycheck home to parents struggling through the Depression's long shadow. She is the widow whose husband died at Pearl Harbor, who welds fury and grief into every seam. Nearly 1/3 of shipyard workers are women. They work beside men who built bridges during the New Deal, beside black laborers who migrated north from southern fields, seeking dignity and wages, beside immigrants who speak broken English but understand the universal language of blueprints and measurements. They work 12-hour shifts in rain and fog through winters, when the San Francisco Bay wind cuts through layers of clothing through summers, when the heat radiating from steel makes breathing difficult. They build ships not only to fight, but to mean something. In towns across America, children collect scrap metal, old pots and pans, broken tools, bicycle frames, anything that can be melted down and reborn as part of a ship's hull. Churches sponsor vessels raising money to fund construction, attending launches where champagne breaks across the bow and crowds cheer as another hull slides into the water. Every launch is a community celebration, a collective act of defiance against tyranny half a world away. For many workers, the shipyards offer something beyond paychecks. They offer purpose. A farmer from Oklahoma arrives in Richmond with nothing but a bindle, and hope gets hired the same day, learns to operate a crane by the end of the week. A black welder from Alabama discovers he can make triple what he earned. Picking cotton discovers he can rent an apartment without being turned away. Discovers that when you're building ships to save the world, skin color matters less than skill and speed. The yards are not paradise. Racism persists. Women face harassment and skepticism. Accidents happen, falls from scaffolding, burns from welding torches, crushed fingers in machinery. The work is dangerous and exhausting. Some workers collapse from fatigue. Some quit after a single shift, overwhelmed by the noise and the pace and the relentless pressure. But most stay. Most return day after day, shift after shift, because they understand what's at stake. Every ship they build carries soldiers toward liberation, carries food toward starving cities, carries hope toward shores darkened by occupation. In the Kaiser shipyards, a woman named Wendy the Welder becomes legendary for her speed and precision. She can weld a perfect seam faster than men twice her size, moving along the hull with a rhythm that looks like dancing. Photographers capture her mid-work torch, blazing sparks cascading around her like fireworks, her face set in concentration. The image appears in newspapers across the country. She becomes a symbol, but she is not alone. Beside her are hundreds, thousands of others, whose names history won't remember, but whose work shaped the outcome of the war. The man who operates the crane that lifts engine blocks into place, timing his movements with split-second precision. The teenager who checks welds for flaws, running her hands along seams, feeling for irregularities that instruments might miss. The supervisor who coordinates 3 shifts, who sleeps 4 hours a night and dreams in blueprints. They are united not by race or class or gender, but by production. By the knowledge that somewhere across the Atlantic or the Pacific soldiers are waiting for the cargo these ships will carry. That cities are starving for the food these hulls will transport. That victory depends not on grand strategy alone, but on ordinary people doing extraordinary work fast. In 1943, captured documents reached the Kriegsmarine's Engineering Bureau in Berlin. Intelligence reports compiled from neutral observers, from reconnaissance photographs, from intercepted radio transmissions. The numbers are staggering, almost absurd. The Americans have built over 1,000 cargo ships in a single year. 1,000. German analysts are trained to be skeptical. Intelligence is often flawed, exaggerated, corrupted by wishful thinking or deliberate misinformation. They check the sources. They cross-reference data. They send requests for aerial reconnaissance of American coastal shipyards. The photographs come back: Richmond, Portland, Baltimore, Savannah. The images show something that shouldn't be possible. Dozens of hulls in various stages of construction packed so tightly together that the shipyards look like forests of steel. More ships being built simultaneously in a single American yard than Germany is constructing across its entire maritime industry. The analysts stand silent, passing photographs between them, counting hulls, recounting, trying to find the error that must exist somewhere in the data. There is no error. Admiral Karl Dönitz, commander of Germany's U-boat fleet, receives the intelligence briefings with growing unease. His submarines are winning tactical victories, sinking Allied shipping at a rate that should be unsustainable. But the numbers refuse to cooperate with strategy. For every ship his U-boats send to the bottom, the Americans launch 3 more. The mathematics of attrition are turning against him. He writes in a classified report, "For every ship we sink, the Americans build 3. We are fighting not an enemy navy, but an enemy factory. And we cannot torpedo a factory in California." At Peenemünde, where Germany's finest engineers design V-2 rockets and advanced weapons systems, a group gathers to analyze American industrial photographs. These are men who understand production, who have pushed German manufacturing to its absolute limits. They study the images of American shipyards with the intensity of scholars examining ancient texts. One engineer, his name lost to history, places a photograph on the table. It shows the Kaiser shipyards from above, a god's eye view of organized chaos. He counts the visible Liberty ships under construction, 17 in this single yard alone. 17 simultaneous builds, where German doctrine would call for sequential construction to ensure quality control. They build ships, he says quietly, the way we build automobiles. They have industrialized what should not be industrialized. Another engineer shakes his head. The welds will fail. Welded hulls cannot withstand ocean stress. They are building coffins, not vessels. But intelligence reports indicate otherwise. Liberty ships are crossing the Atlantic, surviving storms, delivering cargo. Some crack in cold water, this is true. Some break apart in rough seas. But most survive. Most complete their missions. And even the losses are acceptable because replacement hulls are already sliding into the water. The industrial asymmetry is staggering, almost obscene. Germany has perfected precision. Manufacturing has created weapons of incredible sophistication, has engineered solutions to problems that seemed impossible. But precision takes time. Perfection demands patience. And time is the one resource the Axis powers no longer have. While Germany perfects, America produces. While one side worships precision, the other worships output. While German engineers calculate the optimal design for a cargo vessel, American workers are building the 10th iteration of an adequate design, learning from each hull, improving incrementally, moving forward through volume rather than perfection. In the cold logic of industrial warfare, adequacy multiplied trumps perfection divided. A Luftwaffe reconnaissance pilot, debriefed after flying over the American East Coast, describes what he saw. The shipyards never sleep. At night, they blaze with light. You can see the sparks from welding torches from 10,000 feet. It looks like the coast is on fire. There are more ships under construction in Baltimore alone than we have in our entire merchant fleet. His superior marks the report as reliable, but depressing. What use is reliability when the truth is this bleak German strategic planning begins to shift, accounting for an enemy that can absorb losses that would cripple any other nation that can replace destroyed material faster than it can be destroyed, that has turned its entire continental economy into a weapon pointed across two oceans. The engineers understand before the generals do, this is not a war they can win through tactical brilliance alone.
We have to find out what this means.
By 1944, the numbers have become a tidal wave that no strategy can hold back. Liberty ships carry 2/3 of all Allied cargo across every ocean to every theatre. They are everywhere and nowhere, anonymous grey hulls that blend into convoys that disappear into fog and distance, that arrive at ports carrying the materials that keep armies moving and cities breathing. Every invasion depends on them. North Africa Liberty ships deliver the tanks and fuel and ammunition that drive Rommel back across the desert. Sicily, they carry the invasion force that cracks open Fortress Europe's southern door. Normandy, they crowd the English Channel in the days before D-Day, packed bow to stern with vehicles and supplies, waiting for the signal to cross. They bring tanks, still smelling of factory grease, their treads wrapped in protective coating, their guns not yet fired in anger. They bring aircraft in crates, disassembled into components that will be reassembled on forward airfields. They bring food mountains of it enough to feed entire armies for months. They bring fuel in barrels, stacked in holds volatile and dangerous, the lifeblood of mechanized warfare. They bring medicine, ammunition, spare parts, letters from home, everything that transforms men into armies and armies into liberation. Each time a U-boat claims a kill, the torpedo's explosion echoing through dark water, the crew surfaces to observe their victory hull, broken cargo spilling into the sea, survivors clinging to wreckage in water, cold enough to kill. In minutes, the U-boat commander logs another ship, destroyed another small victory in the Atlantic's endless battle. But a new hull is already sliding into the water 3,000 miles away. The replacement ship was being welded together while the torpedoed vessel was still loading cargo in New York. By the time the U-boat returns to port to resupply, the replacement has already crossed the Atlantic and delivered its cargo. The German Navy cannot outpace industrial gravity. Admiral Dönitz realizes this with growing desperation. He orders more U-boats built faster construction, technological improvements to increase kill rates, but German shipyards cannot match American output. For every U-boat launched, America launches 20 Liberty ships. The mathematics are brutal and irreversible. In factories thousands of miles from any ocean in towns that have never seen salt water, the next convoy is already being welded together. Steel mills in Pittsburgh run 24 hours, pouring molten metal into molds that will become hull plates. Engine manufacturers in Ohio assemble steam plants that will push ships across oceans they'll never see. In countless small workshops, workers machine valves and fittings and components, each piece marked with specifications, each one destined for a specific section of a specific ship. The supply chain is a marvel of coordination. Raw materials flow from mines to mills to factories to shipyards in a continuous stream orchestrated by logistics officers who track every shipment, every delivery, ensuring that no yard ever stops working for lack of materials. When a shipyard in Portland needs more steel plate, trains are already rolling toward it from mills in Pennsylvania. When Richmond runs low on welding rods, warehouses in California dispatch trucks before the request is officially filed. The mathematics of war have shifted from strategy to supply. Generals still matter, Eisenhower, Patton, Montgomery, but beneath their decisions supporting every offensive, enabling every victory, is this river of material flowing across oceans in ugly grey hulls that no one will remember individually and that collectively change the course of history. The Americans have industrialized victory itself. They have proven that war in the modern age is not won primarily on battlefields, but in factories, not through tactical brilliance alone, but through the grinding power of production, the ability to absorb losses and replace them before the enemy can capitalize the transformation of entire economies into weapons more powerful than any bomb or tank or aircraft. A Liberty ship, leaving New York Harbor, passes another entering. One delivers. One departs to load again. The cycle never breaks. The supply never stops. The tide has turned, and it flows in only one direction. The Liberty ship was never beautiful, and beauty was never the point. 2,710 of them built between 1,941 and 1,945. 2,710 identical grey hulls, each one a copy of the last, each one carrying the weight of a world at war. More than 200 still exist today, scattered across ports and museums, rusting monuments to an industrial age that has passed into memory. They carried 2/3 of all wartime cargo. Not some, not most. 2/3. Every rifle shipped to Europe likely travelled in a Liberty ship hold. Every gallon of fuel that powered tanks across France. Every crate of medicine that saved lives in field hospitals. Every bag of flour that became bread in liberated cities. The tonnage is almost incomprehensible. 39 million tons of cargo transported across hostile waters. Enough material to rebuild entire nations, to sustain entire continents. But what stunned German engineers most, what kept them awake in the ruins of their collapsing Reich, was not the ships themselves. Ships are steel and engineering problems that can be solved with enough resources and skill. What they couldn't comprehend was the people who built them. Teenagers with no experience, mothers who'd never held a welding torch. Factory workers who couldn't read blueprints at the start of their first shift, but were supervising construction teams within months. Ordinary people, not engineers, not specialists, not the carefully trained craftsmen that German industry relied upon, constructing miracles faster than empires could destroy them. The German military-industrial complex was built on expertise, on years of training, on the assumption that complex machinery required complex knowledge to produce. The Americans shattered that assumption. They proved that complexity could be broken down into simple, repeatable tasks, that expertise could be distributed across hundreds of unskilled workers, each one mastering a single step in a larger process they might never fully understand. It redefined warfare at a fundamental level. Wars had always been won by superior tactics, better weapons, more skilled soldiers. But the Second World War proved something darker and more profound, that industrial capacity could overwhelm tactical brilliance, that production could trump precision, that the nation which could mobilize its entire civilian population into manufacturing could defeat the nation that relied on professional soldiers and craftsmen alone. It redefined democracy too. The Liberty ship wasn't built by elites or experts. It was built by everyone. By people who believed that ordinary work could achieve extraordinary things, that welding a seam or operating a crane or checking a blueprint was a form of service as meaningful as carrying a rifle. That victory belonged not to generals alone, but to every person who showed up for a shift, who chose fatigue over rest, who turned their hands to tasks they'd never imagined themselves capable of performing. War was no longer won by generals in command posts, moving pins across maps. It was won by welders in shipyards, by farmers turned factory workers, by women who proved that strength came in forms the old world had never acknowledged. The home front wasn't separate from the war front. It was the same front, just fought with different tools. And the Liberty ship became the symbol of all of it. Not the tanks or planes or aircraft carriers that dominate historical memory, but these ugly utilitarian vessels that no one romanticizes, that carry no names, that echo through time, that exist in historical consciousness as statistics rather than legends. But statistics, when multiplied, become destiny. 2,710 ships, 39 million tons, 4 days and 15 hours from keel to launch. Every 8.8 hours, another hull entering the water. Numbers that German engineers studied with the fascination of men watching their own defeat, written in mathematics they couldn't refute. The Liberty ship proved that simplicity, when multiplied by determination and organized with ruthless efficiency, becomes a force more powerful than perfection. That adequate design produced in overwhelming numbers defeats superior design produced in limited quantities. That democracy, when fully mobilized, when every citizen becomes a participant rather than a spectator, possesses an industrial strength that tyranny cannot match. When the war ends, the Liberty shipyards fall silent almost overnight. The last hull slides into the water in September 1945, and with it, an era closes. Workers return home to lives that suddenly feel smaller, quieter, less urgent. Welding torches cool for the final time. Cranes stop their endless swing across scaffolding. The 24-hour roar of construction, the hammering and grinding and hissing that defined wartime fades into memory. The ships themselves scatter across every ocean repurposed for peacetime trade, carrying grain instead of tanks, machinery instead of ammunition. Some are sold to foreign nations. Some are mothballed in reserve fleets, anchored in foggy bays waiting for wars that never come. Others are scrapped, their steel recycled into bridges and buildings, their utility outlasting their purpose. The last hulls rust in forgotten harbours' barnacles, claiming what welders once joined salt water, slowly reclaiming what was taken from the earth and briefly shaped into tools of salvation. But their legacy endures in ways both visible and invisible. Every modern cargo ship traces its lineage back to the Liberty ship's philosophy: standardization, prefabrication, the assembly line approach to maritime construction. Every container vessel stacked with goods from across the world owes something to the idea that ships can be mass-produced, that ocean transport can be industrialized, that quantity has its own quality. The German engineers, who once dismissed mass production as crude and unsophisticated, came to study it after the war. In the ruins of Hamburg and Bremen, in the occupied zones where Allied administrators oversaw reconstruction, former Kriegsmarine officers toured American industrial facilities, took notes on production techniques, absorbed lessons written in their defeat. One was quoted years later in an interview recorded for a documentary that few people watched. "We built for perfection. They built for purpose. We thought craftsmanship was sacred. They proved that speed was holier. In the end, the war was not lost on battlefields. It was lost in shipyards we never saw, by workers whose names we never knew, building ships faster than we could comprehend." The Liberty ship had proven a truth that transcended ideology and national identity, that cut through the propaganda and politics of wartime. That simplicity, when organized with relentless efficiency and multiplied by collective will, becomes strength. That a free people given purpose and tools and trust can outproduce any system built on coercion and expertise alone. That sometimes the answer isn't building something perfect. Sometimes the answer is building something adequate and building it faster than anyone thought possible, and never stopping until the job is done. The Liberty ship was not a weapon. It carried no guns launched, no torpedoes dropped, no bombs. It was a bridge forged from steel and sweat and speed, spanning the distance between desperation and hope, between tyranny and liberation. It carried soldiers not just across oceans, but across history itself. From a world burning under occupation to a world rebuilt in freedom's image. Every hull was a promise kept, a commitment honored, a demonstration that democracy could deliver not just ideals but material reality, not just speeches but steel. And when the German engineers finally saw how fast America could build one, when they stood before reconnaissance photographs and intelligence reports that refused to lie, they realized something deeper than military defeat. They had witnessed the industrialization of democracy, the moment when freedom proved it could outproduce fear, when ordinary people demonstrated that their collective will, properly organized and fiercely motivated, could overwhelm any system built on domination and control. In war, perfection dies quickly. Perfect ships sink. Perfect plans shatter against reality. Perfect armies bleed and break under the weight of sustained combat. But speed endures. Will endures. Unity endures. The ability to absorb losses and continue to replace what's destroyed faster than it can be destroyed, to transform entire nations into factories of liberation that endures long after the last shot is fired. The Liberty ship. The ship that shouldn't exist, built by people who weren't supposed to be able to build it in timeframes that defied everything the experts knew. The ugly duckling that became the arsenal of democracy. The ship that changed the world.